Well, speaking of big money, new reports today of serious campaign cash being raised ahead of the midterm elections, which are in November. And it turns out a lot of this money has absolutely nothing to do with Washington. But it could wind up affecting the balance of power there. Here to explain what's going on and why, Steve Hayes, a senior writer for the Weekly Standard and a Fox News contributor, and Erica Payne, the former deputy finance director at the DNC, Democratic National Committee, and founder of the Agenda Project. Okay, so this is so interesting to me, Steve. Dough is coming in, and it is coming in huge on both sides, and it is going not necessarily for our U.S. congressmen and our senators, but for state lawmaker races, state legislatures, and governorships. Why should the nation at large be looking so carefully at those races?
Well, because this is all about long-term investments. What's going to happen after these elections coming up is that you're going to see redistricting, congressional redistricting across the country. You're going to have states that lose seats. You're going to have states that gain seats. And the states that have control of state houses, both the legislatures and the governorships, are going to be the ones, the parties, excuse me, that have control of governorships and state legislatures are going to be the ones who redraw the districts. And the districts, as we all know, we've all seen this, the sort of screwy maps, are often drawn or almost always drawn in a way that benefits political parties rather than a way that, you know, from my perspective, makes sense. So the parties that get to redraw the map may find themselves benefiting by, you know, half a dozen, maybe more seats for the next 10 years. Right,
because if you put the little, like when you're drawing the district lines where people vote, if you put a nice big line around mostly liberal districts, then you're probably going to get a liberal Democrat elected to that office. Whereas if you draw your county line around a district that has more Republicans in it, maybe you get a different result. Erica, that's why everybody's watching these races so closely. National donors funneling money into small communities, including states like Indiana, where I'm told if the GOP picks up 3 seats in the state house there, then the party controls both chambers, and that could help Republicans on the national level. And that's just one microcosm.
That's right. There are about 7,000 state legislative seats up this time, and there are only about 100 that can really help swing the balance of the whole country. And so those 100 are going to be the races to watch, which, you know, on some level, I guess, depending on how you look at it, makes the race kind of interesting. From where I'm sitting, I think I join a lot of Americans in being kind of disgusted with how much money has to do with politics right now. And you just mentioned Indiana, and the average state house race in Indiana costs $150,000, which is an absurd amount of money. And there's actually a state legislative race in Texas, which will be one of the really hotly contested ones, and it's estimated to cost $1 million. And I'm sure other people agree with me that there's $1 million we could spend a lot better than that way. So.
But Steve, I mean, the stakes are extremely high because Tom DeLay did this down in Texas. This was like his rise to fame, did he not, Steve? Like he basically said, let's get control of the state legislature so we can redraw the state lines, so we can increase the number of seats we're going to get in the U.S. Congress. And it all came to fruition and went up to the Supreme Court later.
Yeah, right. No, I think that's exactly right. And it's why it's so important for the respective parties to be able to have this kind of control, to have this kind of power. And as I say, this is a long-term plan. You know, rather than spend a couple $100,000 on a congressional race, a U.S. congressional race, U.S. House race, a donor with a lot of money is much better off spending that race on one of these 100 races that Erica mentions, where you're going to get more bang for your buck. I mean, $150,000 may seem like a lot to a lot of people, but in the sort of vast world of political campaign finance, it really isn't that much money, and you can get far more bang for your buck in these smaller races, even with money pouring in from interest groups and what have you. A dollar spent in a state house race that could affect the makeup of the U.S. Congress for the next decade is much better spent than a dollar in a U.S. House race that may be competitive for this year.
That is what, Eric, and that's why one top Republican was saying that we can not only make gains in Congress for 2 years, but for 10 years if we can win at the state level in these upcoming elections. Do you see those as critical to what happens in this country politically for the next decade?
Oh, there's no question about it. I mean, absolutely. The different states have different laws about how they divide it up, but who is in power in those states definitely matters, and that's when the redistricting is going to happen. And, you know, so both political parties are going to fight it out. They're going to duke it out to the finish, and they're going to call on every single one of their major donors, both people who are interested in good public policy and, you know, special interests who are not interested in good public policy. And, you know, all the money is going to come flowing in, and we're going to stay with the system that that we have, which frankly is broken on both sides, and it rewards political parties, but it doesn't necessarily reward the American people.
Well, it's going to be interesting to watch, because they say right now the Democrats have more money in the coffers in certain categories, but the Republicans are more motivated to actually show up and vote come the midterm. So still have a few months to watch it. Steve and Erica, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks a lot.